Welcome back to the channel. This is The Fan Awakens, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this review and discussion of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. It has been out for a full weekend now, and I think it's finally time to give my spoiler-heavy thoughts. I've been kind of quiet on the matter, and I think that there is, for me, a lot to talk about. I don't think I've been this excited for any film since The Force Awakens came out, and I've certainly never been this emotional in a film. Because, there's a lot of lead up. This was the end of the saga, a saga that's meant a lot to me, as it has millions of other people. But it sort of dominated my life in a lot of ways. And I think that no matter what happened in this movie, I was going to be emotional. So I wanted to take my time. I've been able to see it a few times now. And I've sort of solidified a lot of my thoughts in a way that I think is I'm able to give those thoughts here. So what I will say is that the movie is 2 hours, 22 minutes, including credits, which, when you think about everything they had to do in this film, it's not much time. And I think that they used a lot of that time in a way that satisfied me personally. So to put it, before I go into the details of this, I think that the film is a ton of fun. It's the closest I've felt to the original trilogy since the original trilogy. I think that the pace is very fast, very quick. We get our big three heroes together in Finn, Rey, and Poe, and it feels sort of like Luke and Leia at a lot of times in the first half of the film, or the first 40%, I'll say, and that part works for me more than any other part. We get to see, of course, we open the film with Kylo Ren massacring people on what appears to be, apparently, from a visual dictionary, it is Mustafar, which I think you can delve deeper into that from the VR game that came out. But with Star Wars, I think that with where Episode 8 left off and where JJ must have wanted to go, it feels a bit disgruntled. It doesn't feel very fluid. And I watched all the movies before I went in to see 9, and I had complained previously about there not being a triple feature in theaters where I live. I wanted something, a marathon of some sort, but I'm almost glad that I didn't, because watching Episode 8 right before I went in, it did feel very different. It looks different, it feels different, the tone is different, which is okay since it is a different film, different filmmaker, made by, of course, J.J. Abrams, who did Episode 7, making him the only other person besides George Lucas to direct multiple Star Wars films. And I think he was a clear choice. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. He has imprinted on me and my creativity pretty much to no end. I love J.J. Abrams to death, and The Force Awakens is my favorite Star Wars film of all time, perhaps even my favorite film of all time, but that's for a different video. Let's get into this, though. So we start out, we have the Kylo thing. Oh, the Emperor is back. It says in the crawl, death speaks, which I found a bit surprising. You know, they sort of thrust us into it, say the Emperor is back, accept it. Okay, the pace is fast enough. I move on from that. It's fine. But then we get to the great stuff. We get to see Poe, Finn, Chewie on the Falcon. If you read some of the extended canon, you kind of get this. They give you a lot of how Rey doesn't really trust anyone else to fly the Falcon, outside of course, Chewbacca. And Poe always wants to fly it, and he never gets to. We get to open this film. It's really fun. They have that dialogue of like, well, Rey's not here, as he's light speed skipping. And it all feels sort of like Han and Luke to me. Han, Luke, and Chewie. It really reminded me of that, which is a really nice treat. Then we meet back with Rey on the planet, and she's training with Leia, which is something that I thought was incredibly beautiful, personally. And I think one thing that stood out to me was that every scene Leia had, it was very minimal, which kind of shows you that that's the best of what they had to work with. And so to sort of put that in perspective, that feel like never underestimate a droid, nothing's impossible. Those were like her big lines, and they had to work around that, which I thought they did very respectfully and very beautifully, and in a way that touched me personally. The moment where Rey and Leia hug almost felt like it was a moment for the audience. It lets you express your emotion in that moment with the people on screen. I thought Daisy Ridley's performance was her best of the trilogy, and that's not knocking on any others. I love her performances in both 7 and 8. It shows a lot of emotional range. I think it's very underrated performances from her in all 3 films at this point, because people like to note, Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill's performance in 8, I think, is his best performance in his career, to be honest. And it's just something that I really want to take note on, as Rey is my favorite character, not only in the sequel trilogy but in Star Wars. It hit me at a specific time when The Force Awakens come out. I've always sort of attached myself to that character along with Finn and their relationship together, and that's why I was especially bummed. Not that I don't like Episode 8, I do, but I was bummed that they didn't get a single scene together until the very end, because that was my favorite part of Episode 7, along with their relationship with Han Solo. So in Episode 9, we do finally get that adventure that we've been hoping for. You know, you get adventures in 4, 5, and 6. The prequels feel a bit more like. I've always complained that they don't have a central character. Yes, there's Anakin and Obi-Wan, but it's really widespread, and you don't really have a trio to follow, per se, as closely as in the original trilogy with Luke, Han, and Leia. And in the sequel trilogy with Rey, Finn, and Poe, and Kylo Ren, of course. But we get that back. They get to go on a desert mission to Pisana. I thought that all the way through that, it's incredible. The costumes are great. The location is fantastic. It feels very Star Wars. Yes, it's another desert planet, but I think that it all works. And a lot of people are calling this very fan service heavy, which I agree with. But I'm okay with that because this is the film that's supposed to wrap up all 9 films in a way. I wanted it to be a celebration of Star Wars, and I felt like it was a celebration. You know, no matter what era you grew up in, because I grew up with the prequels being my first foray into the Star Wars galaxy, and with that, I found the prequels, not the prequels, the originals, after I found that, and so I appreciate them all to degrees of nostalgia and whatnot. But I think that they had plenty of fan service moments for anyone, depending on what time you grew up. Maybe some more than others, but it doesn't matter. You know, it was a celebration. I thought it was very positive, which I did appreciate. I think that I was hoping this film, and I think Disney was probably hoping this film would unite the fan base a lot more, and it definitely didn't do that. Although the fan reactions on paper is pretty good. When you look at the Rotten Tomatoes fan rating, it's at like 86%. The critic rating is at 56%, which is obviously kind of flip-flopped from The Last Jedi. But I don't think 56 is all that bad either. Yes, it's got the rotten stamp on it. But 56, it's very divisive, you know? It shows that, you know, essentially half the people liked it, half the people didn't. And I certainly understand why. I certainly understand the problems, a lot of the problems that the people are having with this film, saying that, you know, there's no real clear story. I agree that it's almost like Episode 8 didn't happen with our main relationship as far as Rey and Kylo Ren go. That is a big issue I have. It's like we're starting off their relationship in 9, where it started off in 8. And I thought that, you know, their relationship was sort of solidified, that the door was closed. The choices were presented and they were made. Kylo remained evil. Rey remained on the light side of the Force. But this sort of takes that away. I think that Poe Dameron is a fun character again. He makes a lot of jokes, but they're not as on the nose and like slapstick as they were in Episode 8, which I thought was a great change. You hear the cast in interviews often talk about how they're happy that JJ brought them all together. They had more to do. Finn certainly had a lot more to do in this film than in 8. And I do apologize for keep bringing in 8. I'm not trying to rank on it in any way. I'm not trying to rub it through the dirt in any way. It's just it's sort of noticeable differences I've found. So with that, I also think that yeah, you know, it is a bit hard, and that's where the film takes a dip for me. I love this film to death, and I think it's one of the best. I think it's some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen since the original trilogy, since Episode 7, until they leave Kijimi. Once they get to the moon of Endor, whichever moon it may be where the Death Star lies, because they're not very clear on that, it sort of takes a lull for me. I think that they establish a connection with Finn and with Rey that I wish was delved deeper into, because this is our last chance to do it, presumably. Even though they say it's the end of the saga, but I sort of like to say it's the end of the saga for now, because I really don't believe it's the end. 10, 15 years from now, I do believe we'll get a Star Wars Episode 10. We'll get the cast back. It'll give them time to do other things in their career. Maybe not everybody comes back, but I do believe it will happen. With that being said, when we go to the Death Star, one of my big complaints, which is also a hot take, just like Rey being my favorite character, I'm not a big fan of Kylo Ren. And that goes further into my problems with Star Wars in general. Not to say they're problems that I love Darth Vader to death. I think he's probably my favorite cinematic villain of all time. But I think that I do have some issues with his redemption in the original trilogy. And the funny thing is, I think that his redemption works a lot better if you've only seen the original trilogy. Once you've seen the prequels, it becomes a bit more, a bit a bit harder for me to get on board with the idea that this guy who slayed all these younglings, had a direct hand in an entire planet being destroyed, has committed mutiny to no end, is redeemed by the Jedi by one good deed. And yes, it was a big good deed, but why did he commit that good deed? He was trying to kill his son a moment prior, and then seeing someone else try to kill his son uh, ultimately made him uh, do the right thing for once. And it can almost still be seen as a selfish act, but he brings balance to the Force for now. I also don't. I've been hearing a lot of criticisms that, oh, well, this makes Anakin's change of heart useless, or it doesn't matter. And I disagree, because he did bring balance to the Force. That's what the prophecy stated, but it didn't say forever. It's not going to be balanced forever. Things are going to happen. The Force works in mysterious ways that we don't understand. And that leaves you opportunity for story to evolve. And George Lucas had plans for a 7, 8, and 9. And yes, they didn't go with him. And I'm sort of glad they didn't, to be honest, which could be another hot take, sure. But I think that people are upset that there's dark side users at all, when the Force, just because the prophecy said this thing and it seemed to be true to a degree, who knows? As Mace Windu said, I believe it was Mace Windu, a prophecy misread perhaps. No, I think it might have been Yoda, but either way, someone said, that was paraphrased, but I just, so with the act of Kylo Ren, the reason, we go, they have the big Leia moment, which leads to one of my favorite moments in the saga, which is Han Solo's memory being sort of used by Kylo Ren, then Ben Solo, really. It's a poignant moment that I really attached to, and I didn't think we were ever going to see Harrison Ford as Han Solo again, so I'll cherish that for the rest of my life. I love that moment to death. But, we get him just turning to Ben, which does bother me, because he was never a Sith. That's made clear. He never had the Sith eyes. Neither did Snoke. Snoke, we figured out, was a clone of some sort created by Palpatine. But within this franchise, he's played a major role in the death of billions of innocent lives. When you look at what he did to the Hosnian system, yes, he didn't pull the trigger, but he was behind that. He was working with the First Order directly. He was pretty much the third in command of the First Order behind Snoke, and maybe at times General Hux, although Hux was always a puppet and a pushover. And he was fine with it. He oversaw it. There's nothing wrong with destroying 7 or 44 billion lives. I don't remember what it was. You can look it up. Beyond that, we just see this film open up to him murdering people and cutting arms off, and just because he's moody, essentially. I know the dark side is in his ear, but he's still who he is. He makes these decisions. And so when we ultimately get to the end, which I'm going to skip to for a moment, the idea that this guy can just decide to change his mind on a whim, I'm not against the idea of atonement, and I think that I've made plenty of mistakes, and I think that everybody deserves a second chance, and I think that no matter what's happened, it's case by case, but I don't think that this person should have a happy ending. I understand you don't want the Skywalker saga to end in tragedy for the Skywalkers, but I don't think it does when they welcome in Rey as one of their own. I think it's still a success. They lost Ben. You have to deal with that. That's good story beats for me. You have to atone for that. His mother has to atone for that. His uncle has to atone for that. His father gave his life trying to bring him back. And, Luke Skywalker says himself in episode 8, I did not come here to save him. I can't save him. I'm here to confront him because he's gone. He is lost. Leia says it herself. I know my son is gone. And Luke says no one's really gone, but it's just something really bothers me about the idea that he can do one good deed, have a happy ending. I thought that ship had sailed. I am genuinely surprised that it happened. I don't want to take too long on it because it bothers me how much it bothers me, but going to the end, we get to the big battle. So many great moments. We get to see Snap Wexley back in the cockpit. We get to see the Falcon being manned by Chewie, Lando, and Wedge Antilles on the gun, which I never thought I would see, which is really cool. We got to see, we got great music from John Williams, epic space battle, Finn doing things that mattered. Yes, he's riding another horse, but it's different. It's not. It's a real horse. It looks a bit better, and we don't spend 45 minutes on it. So, yeah, there were a lot of things that didn't make sense. Why did they have to take out the tower from the air or from the ground? They can't take out an antenna with a missile. Doesn't really make sense. I understand they have shield generators, but so do all the other ships. Just destroy those. It's kind of odd. But I look past that because it is a very packed film, fast pace again. Sith troopers were in there. They were out. Knights of Ren, I felt, were completely wasted, which is okay because that's not what the story is about. Sort of like the Praetorian Guards. They add to a long list of Star Wars characters that look really cool, and we will probably get really awesome stories about them in the extended canon. But unfortunately, we don't have time to spend 20 minutes on them in the film. But with that, we get to the end. Rey visits Luke Skywalker, and that moment was great. I know a lot of people see it as a jab to Episode 8. It's like it could be a sneak diss. I don't think it is. JJ commented on it saying it wasn't, because Rey goes to throw the saber, just like Luke did in Episode 8, but it's met with Luke catching it as a Force ghost and saying that's no way to treat, a Jedi's weapon, which is sort of like, okay, are you talking about Episode 8 or not? It seemed like it in the moment, but moving on from that whole thing was fan service. Everything with Luke was fan service, and I loved every moment of it. We got to see him lift an X-Wing for Rey out of the water when he thought it was impossible, just as Yoda did for him when he was in a similar position. You had the same music cue. It made me emotional. That was another part that made me emotional. And at the end of this video, I will list every moment that I believe I cried in my first viewing. But we get Rey. She goes to Exegol to face Palpatine, who she found out is her grandfather. Another thing that I will note is that personally, I wasn't really... I won't say I was expecting her to be a Palpatine, but I expected her to be somebody. And being a Palpatine, it seems like I should have expected that. A lot of people wanted her to be a nobody because it's sort of like, shows you don't have to be anybody to be special. And I do believe that's true, but I also believe that since this is the end of the Skywalker saga, you want things to connect. You want things to sort of harken back. And how better than making your main character connect to the past, which some could say is a safe move, and maybe it is. I sort of agree on that, but it did work for me. As another point of view is that why is Rey so strong? I think everybody's wanted that answer for a long time. I don't think you do need an answer, but I definitely think it appeases a lot of concerns that, oh, she's a Palpatine. Makes sense. He's like the most powerful Sith Lord we've ever seen, on screen at least. And so then, she has his power. Makes sense. That's all cleared up. When she gets there, though, she comes in and they kind of have this weird thing where they're in like a coliseum and are all those people the spirits of the Sith past, basically, and Palpatine saying that they all live within him, which I think is nice because it sort of furthers the Force once again. And that's something I've appreciated from the sequel trilogy, is that each film has furthered the Force and furthered our understanding and furthered the abilities of the Force. So JJ doing that made a lot of sense. Is it literal? I don't know. I think that it is a form of what Rey did, which I don't think is literally all the Jedi living within her. Obviously, he has that line, I am all the Sith, and she, hits him with, I am all the Jedi. She had to reach out to them, which she tried to do in the beginning of the film, and this time it just happened to work. She had come a long way in this journey. I think that at this point she had the spirit of a true Jedi, as some would say. If we were playing Lego Star Wars, she would have had all the studs and unlocked true Jedi for the level. But she, the be with me moment, I don't think that it's literally saying that the Jedi live within her. She can call to them for strength and motivation and call to them for wisdom and guidance, just as we've seen Luke do before, but it's in a more powerful way where you're calling on all of the Jedi. I believe only the Jedi that have gone on to become Force ghosts, most likely, but we get some great names in there. Not only do we get obviously a lot of great Hayden Christensen lines, and by a lot I mean two. We get Ewan McGregor saying, which calls back to The Force Awakens, which I love. They put Ewan McGregor in The Force Awakens when she first touched the Skywalker blade hilt, and it says, "Rey, these are your first steps to becoming a Jedi." And in this, Ewan says, who played Obi-Wan, "These are your final steps to becoming a Jedi. Take them now." And like then Hayden Christensen, Anakin Skywalker says, "Bring balance to the Force as I once did." You get the voices of Kane and Freddie Prinze Jr. from Rebels, which is a great deep pull for a lot of people. You get Ahsoka Tano with Ashley Eckstein, which I definitely did not expect to get in this. You got Mace Windu, you got Samuel L. Jackson doing a voice. You got Ayla Secura from Episode 3, The Blue Twi'lek Jedi. She did a voice. We had so many incredible voices, and I thought it's an incredibly powerful moment. I do hear people complaining, like, why didn't the Emperor just stop shooting his lightning at her instead of killing himself? I mean, I think that's kind of, if he stopped shooting the lightning, she would just hit him with the lightsaber and killed him either way. So I think you got to commit. I do believe that the Emperor believed he was stronger than her, certainly, and I believe he was, but at that moment, she got the upset. She got the upset win, and that's all that matters. Something I also did appreciate is that she did it alone, because I was sort of trepidatious to the idea of Kylo Ren saving her, or her needing him to defeat the Emperor. I think that this is her hero's journey. I know a lot of people think Kylo Ren is the best character of the trilogy, and you're certainly not wrong. You're right to that opinion, but my opinion is that Rey is the best character of the trilogy, along with Finn. I just think their bond has been, especially in The Force Awakens, but I've loved the vulnerability. I've loved the parallel to Luke Skywalker in that they're opposites. Luke, when we met him, he wanted to search for this higher purpose. He was a farm boy, and he wanted to be more. He wanted to do more. He knew that there was more out there for him, and he was chasing it nonstop. With Rey, she also came from nothing, but she knew she was destined for more. She could feel this inside her, and she reluctantly avoided it. Not reluctantly, she tried to avoid it. She tried to deny it every step of the way. And her being to the point of accepting this destiny, I think it's a story that, yes, it mirrors the original trilogy, but in a new way, for a new audience, for a new generation. Every generation has a legend, they say in the trailer, and I truly do believe that. And although this trilogy overall feels sort of out of whack, I don't know. It doesn't feel fluid. They clearly didn't have a plan. When I left this film, I was just, I was incredibly emotional, but it just solidified the idea that I wanted J.J. Abrams to do all three. I think everybody can agree on that. Whether you love The Last Jedi or not, maybe not. Maybe if you love The Last Jedi, and I do really enjoy it, but J.J. Abrams, if he would have done all three, I think we would have had a much better cohesive trilogy overall. So we get Rey defeats the Emperor. Finn, we get very clearly is force sensitive, which they had been sprinkling in throughout the film. He says, "Rey's alive." Janice says, "How do you know?" It's a feeling. I love that. We talked about it at length on our podcast, the Fan Awakens podcast, many times. But seeing it happen was a real treat for me. So we have that. Then, of course, Rey collapses and dies. She dies, and that was hard to watch. And then, of course, Ben Solo, who I'll just refer to as Kylo Ren, because I do think that it just doesn't work for me. He climbs up. He walks over to her. Fantastic acting, by the way. Adam Driver is a top-notch actor. He's having one of the best years this year as far as acting goes. Marriage Story, The Report, and now Rise of Skywalker. It was definitely, it was okay, and then he sort of holds her close. He brings her back to life, which I'm okay with, but the amount of force energy that, I'd assume you have to use to save a life should probably take your life instantly. When we look back to when Rey healed the serpent, the effects were immediate. Her hand, she was feeling it immediately. And then the kiss happened, and that was very jarring for me. The problem for me is that the relationship is incredibly toxic. I don't believe, and I could be fact checked here, but I don't believe that Kylo Ren even says her name in the first two films of this trilogy. 7 and 8, he never says her name to my knowledge. He calls her, what girl, scavenger, you're nothing, but not to me. He never says her name. Until this film, he says it twice in like the same moment. And it's very abusive. They're constantly trying to kill each other. Meanwhile, you do have a character in Finn who you've set up a romance in episode 7, which I thought we would build on from here since JJ came back. He asks her, you got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend, obviously, is a joke, but it is alluding to the fact that he's attracted to her. They have so many close moments, he never had any friends. She never had any friends. They never had anyone who cared about each other until they met. And yes, it could be just a best friend relationship, which I think it in the end is, which is fine. But to give her a even if it's in the slightest moment, a romance with Kylo Ren seems off to me. When you have Finn, who's constantly risking life and limb, he showed that they showed through written dialogue that he was attracted to her. Not only that, but I believe that they had a bond. I know him being attracted to her. Maybe she's not attracted to him. That's perfectly fine. But they keep coming together. They're constantly concerned about one another. In episode 8, you have the moment where Rey is about to jettison herself out of the Falcon and confront Kylo Ren. And she waits and she tells Chewie, if you see Finn before I do, tell him. Chewie roars and she says, yeah, tell him that. That's perfect. They have the big moment at the end of 8 where everybody's there, but Rey locks onto Finn, Finn locks onto Rey. They run up and embrace each other and hug. We had that moment in 7. It threw me off. I'll say that. And then the execution was a bit off for me as well. They had that romantic kiss, and then they looked at each other, smiled, waited a couple seconds, and then he died. It just seemed prolonged. It seemed like, you give your life for her, you're giving your life for her. She comes alive, you fall asleep. It just seems like the way it would work. But the problem I really have is that he gets a happy ending. Not trying to be a downer or anything, but just judging from everything we've seen of Kylo Ren, his motives not being very clear other than he had someone in his ear being Snoke, which is an extension of Palpatine. I just don't see reason clear enough for me to believe that he deserves this happy ending. All we've seen is him murder on a mass scale to a mass degree because he's moody, because he's upset. With the case of Anakin Skywalker, he was a slave child. He had to witness his mother die in his arms. Kylo killed his father out of choice. He just killed him. And we never really get an explanation why he hates his parents so much. I understand why he is upset at Luke. They show that in episode 8, and it's unfortunate. But, after that, though, so that's something that bothers me a lot. But we move on from there. And what I do love is that she doesn't take the death hard. It happens. They move on. They just defeated the Empire again. The final order. All is well. And from then on, I'm emotional wreck. We go back to their base. We get to see that shot of Poe in his X-Wing, Rey in Red 5, and the Falcon flying together. As they zoom off to base, they have the big, celebratory moment. Everybody's hugging. Chewie gets Han's medal, which is great because, obviously Leia presented the medals in episode 4 to Luke and Han. Chewie, for some reason, didn't get one. But then they made a comic that showed him getting one, which was great. But then he still gets one, which is presumably Han's medal that Leia laid down with on her final resting place on her deathbed. And that was a really beautiful moment for me. And then, of course, they have the big embrace between the big three, Rey, Poe, and Finn. Very emotional again for me. And beyond that, Rey goes to Tatooine, which I thought was beautiful. The track on the score by John Williams, of course, is called New Home. And I think it's fitting, It felt like a spiritual lay to rest of everything we've seen. Rey goes to Luke's childhood home, takes his and Leia's sabers, buries them, and it felt like, a funeral of sorts. It felt like a bookend. It felt like closure to me. And then, of course, she stands there, pulls out her new saber that she created out of her staff, and she ignites it. They have that person, that lady, ask her, there's no one's been here for so long. Who are you, Rey? Rey who? She has the moment. I know it's super predictable and all, but I love it to death. I think Rey got a proper end. She looks to the side, sees Luke and Leia in Force Ghost form. Rey Skywalker. I think it's beautiful, and that's why I don't think you had to redeem Kylo Ren in the end, because you do have them carrying on the name, atoning for their mistakes, having a beautiful ending, all without him coming back, which, I'll live with. And I'm going to see the film again probably today. But then, we have the fanfare. We have that awesome shot of BB-8 mirroring the binary sunset on Tatooine. We have that great zoomed-in blurry shot of Rey, BB-8, looking at the binary sunset, and it wisps off, and that's it. That's the film. And so it's hard for me to put a number on this. I don't know if I will, just because even now, having seen it a couple times, it's hard for me to really hone in on how I feel, which I do need to get better at, for sure. But overall, I'll just say that for the most part, this film is an incredibly fun time for me. I enjoy the hell out of it. It feels original trilogy. I thought JJ did a lot with what he had. He had so many things to wrap up in such a short time. The narrative could have been better. I think the Kylo Ren arc could have ended differently. I think that it feels like a giant fanfare, which is totally cool to me because that's kind of what I wanted. It feels like a celebration. I enjoy the movie. Where does it rank? I can't quite say yet. I'll probably make another video on that, but it's definitely somewhere. I put it ahead of Solo. I put it ahead of all the prequels, for certain. Episode 3 is maybe close, just because this film feels more Star Wars than any of them to me. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave it right now. I'm gonna leave it kind of vague, but thank you guys for watching. If you'd like and subscribe, you can find us at The Fan Awakens on Instagram. It's just got an underscore between each word. You can find me at Elias_Skywalker on Instagram, on Twitter. Let me know what you thought. Be sure to leave comments, message me there, message me here, and I'll try and reply to all of them. Go see the movie if you haven't. I don't know why you'd watch this video if you haven't seen the movie, but yeah, that's gonna be the review. Thank you all for watching this. And yeah, any other movies you want reviewed, any ideas, let me know. Leave a comment. But thank you guys, and I will see you next time.